The scream came sharp and sudden, slicing through the low hum of conversation in the roadside diner. Marcus Hale's fork froze halfway to his mouth as he watched the young waitress stumble backward, her tray clattering to the floor. Two men, large, loud, and reeking of whiskey, cornered her against the counter, their laughter cruel and predatory. The entire diner fell silent. 30 people. Not one moved. Then a small hand tugged at Marcus's sleeve. "Daddy?" Lily whispered, her 7-year-old voice trembling with something between fear and hope. "Please, help her." In that moment, Marcus knew his carefully balanced life was about to shatter, and he'd have to choose between survival and the man his daughter believed him to be. If you're watching this, I want you to stay until the very end, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about courage. Hit that like button right now and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and old grease, the kind of place that survived on highway traffic and the desperation of people too tired to care about quality. Marcus had been coming here for 3 months, ever since he'd added the evening shift at the distribution center to his already exhausting schedule. 2 jobs weren't enough to get ahead. They were barely enough to stay afloat. But they were what he had. Lily sat across from him in the cracked vinyl booth, her coloring book spread open beside a plate of untouched fries. She'd been unusually quiet tonight, her crayons moving slowly across the page as she drew what looked like a house with an impossibly large sun hanging over it. Marcus watched her from the corner of his eye as he forced down another bite of his sandwich, trying to ignore the exhaustion that had settled into his bones like concrete. "Daddy, do you think Mommy can see us from heaven?" Lily asked suddenly, not looking up from her drawing. The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah had been gone for 2 years now, taken by cancer that had burned through her body with merciless efficiency. 2 years, and Lily still asked questions that Marcus had no idea how to answer. "I think," Marcus started, then stopped, searching for words that wouldn't be a lie but wouldn't break his daughter's heart. "I think she'd be really proud of how hard you're working on that picture." Lily's crayon paused. "That's not an answer." "No," Marcus admitted softly. "It's not." Before Lily could press further, the diner's front door banged open with enough force to rattle the pictures on the wall. 2 men stumbled in, their movements loose and uncoordinated, their voices already too loud for the small space. Marcus recognized the signs immediately. He'd grown up around men like this, knew the particular danger that came with alcohol and ego mixed together in the wrong proportions. The younger of the 2, maybe 30, with a shaved head and tattoos crawling up his neck, headed straight for the counter. His companion, older and heavier, with a face that looked like it had met too many fists, followed close behind. The waitress, a girl who couldn't have been more than 22, with tired eyes and blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, looked up from the coffee pot she was refilling with an expression that Marcus recognized. It was the look of someone who knew trouble when she saw it, but didn't have the luxury of running from it. "Well, well," the younger man said, his words slurring together at the edges. "Ain't you just sweet as peach pie?" The waitress, Nina, according to her name tag, set down the coffee pot with deliberate care. "What can I get you, gentlemen?" "Gentlemen," the older man repeated, laughing like she'd told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. "You hear that, Travis? She called us gentlemen." Travis leaned against the counter, his body language aggressive even in its casualness. "I like polite girls. Shows good upbringing." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Around the diner, other customers were studiously looking anywhere but at the scene unfolding at the counter. The cook, a middle-aged man with graying hair and a substantial gut, had frozen in the kitchen doorway, his expression uncertain. "Coffee?" Nina asked, her voice steady even though Marcus could see the tension in her shoulders. "Menu?" "What I want," Travis said, reaching out to touch the ends of her ponytail. "Ain't on the menu." Nina jerked back, and the coffee pot she'd just set down wobbled dangerously close to the edge of the counter. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to keep your hands to yourself." "Or what?" The older man stepped closer, effectively boxing her in. "You gonna call the cops? We ain't done nothing wrong, just being friendly." Marcus's hands curled into fists under the table. Across from him, Lily had stopped coloring, her eyes wide and focused on the scene at the counter. "Daddy," she whispered, so quietly he almost didn't hear it. "Don't look at them, baby," Marcus said, his voice low and tight. "Just color your picture." But Lily didn't pick up her crayon. "That man touched her. She doesn't like it." "I know." "Someone should help her." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. The smart thing to do was nothing. The smart thing was to finish his sandwich, pay his bill, and get Lily out of here before the situation escalated into something dangerous. He had 2 jobs that he couldn't afford to lose. He had a daughter who depended on him for everything. He had a life that was held together with duct tape and determination, and one wrong move could bring it all crashing down. At the counter, Travis had his hand on Nina's arm now, his grip tight enough that Marcus could see her wince. "Come on, sweetheart," Travis was saying. "Don't be like that. We're just trying to have a good time." "Let go of me." Nina's voice had gone quiet, the kind of quiet that came from real fear. The cook had disappeared back into the kitchen. The other customers were suddenly very interested in their plates. Even the elderly couple in the booth by the window, who had been there when Marcus and Lily arrived, were staring determinedly at their coffee cups. "Daddy," Lily's voice was stronger now, more insistent. "Daddy, please help her." Marcus looked at his daughter, really looked at her. She was staring at him with absolute faith, with the unshakable belief that her father could fix this, that her father would fix this, because that's what good men did. That's what heroes did. And Marcus was no hero. He was a 34-year-old widower working 2 jobs to keep his daughter fed and housed. He was exhausted and scared and barely holding on. He was the last person who should get involved in this. Travis pulled Nina closer, and she made a small sound of distress that cut through every excuse Marcus was building in his head. "Stay here," Marcus said to Lily, sliding out of the booth. His legs felt unsteady beneath him, his heart hammering against his ribs like it was trying to escape. "Don't go anywhere," he added, his voice firmer than he felt. "You understand me?" Lily nodded, her eyes huge and solemn. Marcus walked toward the counter. Each step felt like moving through water, like his body was fighting against what his mind had decided to do. Behind him, he could hear Lily's breathing, quick and anxious. Around him, he could feel the weight of every watching eye in the diner, all those people who were relieved it was him and not them. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice rough. "The lady asked you to let go." Travis turned, his bloodshot eyes narrowing as he took in Marcus's appearance. Marcus knew what he saw. A tall but thin man in work clothes that had seen better days, with circles under his eyes and dirt under his fingernails. Not impressive, not threatening. "This ain't your business," Travis said dismissively, turning back to Nina. "I'm making it my business." Marcus's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Let her go." The older man stepped away from the counter, squaring his shoulders in a way that made his considerable bulk more apparent. "You got a problem, friend." "Yeah," Marcus said, forcing the word past the fear coating his throat. "I got a problem with you harassing that girl." "Harassing?" Travis laughed, though he still hadn't released Nina's arm. "We're just being friendly. Maybe you should mind your own business before you get hurt." Marcus could see Nina's face clearly now. She was terrified, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes, but not yet falling. Her free hand gripped the edge of the counter so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Last time," Marcus said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded despite the terror coursing through him. "Let her go." Travis released Nina's arm, but only so he could turn fully to face Marcus. "Or what? You gonna make me?" Marcus had been in exactly 3 fights in his entire life. He'd lost 2 of them badly and won the 3rd only because the other guy had slipped on wet grass and knocked himself out on a brick planter. He had no illusions about his chances here. Travis was younger, probably stronger, and definitely meaner. The older man was bigger and looked like violence was a language he spoke fluently, but Lily was watching, and Nina was scared. And somewhere in the back of Marcus's mind, he could hear Sarah's voice from years ago, telling him that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was doing the right thing anyway. "If that's what it takes," Marcus said quietly. For a moment, nothing happened. The diner held its breath. Then Travis moved, shoving Marcus hard enough to send him stumbling backward into a table. Coffee cups rattled. Someone gasped. Marcus caught his balance, his shoulder throbbing where it had connected with the table's edge. Travis was advancing on him, and the older man was moving to flank him. This was bad. This was exactly the nightmare scenario Marcus had been trying to avoid. "Travis, maybe we should just go," the older man said, though he didn't sound particularly committed to the idea. "Nah." Travis cracked his knuckles. "This guy wants to play hero. Let's see how that works out for him." Marcus raised his hands, trying to look non-threatening while also preparing to defend himself. "I don't want to fight you. I just want you to leave that girl alone." "Too late for that." Travis swung. Marcus ducked, more from instinct than skill, and the punch whistled over his head. He tried to back up, to create distance, but his heel caught on a chair leg and he went down hard. Pain exploded through his tailbone as he hit the floor. "Daddy!" Lily's scream cut through the chaos. Marcus looked up to see his daughter standing on the seat of their booth, her face white with fear. That image, his 7-year-old daughter watching him get beaten up in a diner, was worse than any physical pain. Travis grabbed the front of Marcus's shirt, hauling him partially off the floor. Marcus could smell the whiskey on his breath, see the rage in his eyes. This was it. This was the part where Marcus paid for his moment of courage with broken bones and hospital bills he couldn't afford. Then Nina screamed, not in fear this time, in fury. She brought the coffee pot down on the back of Travis's head with enough force to make him release Marcus and stagger forward. The glass didn't break, but the impact was clearly enough to disorient him. "Get away from him!" Nina shouted, brandishing the coffee pot like a weapon. "I've called the police!" The older man, who had been moving toward Marcus, stopped. "Travis, we need to go. Now!" But Travis was beyond reason. He turned on Nina with a snarl, and Marcus saw his opportunity. He lunged forward, catching Travis around the waist in a tackle that was more desperation than technique. They went down together in a tangle of limbs, Travis's elbow catching Marcus in the ribs hard enough to drive the air from his lungs. They grappled on the floor, Travis stronger but Marcus more motivated. Around them, Marcus was vaguely aware of shouting, of movement, of Lily crying. His world had narrowed to the struggle, to keeping Travis down long enough for the police Nina had supposedly called to arrive. A fist connected with Marcus's jaw, snapping his head to the side. Stars burst across his vision. He tasted blood. Travis was on top of him now, raining down punches that Marcus tried desperately to block. Then suddenly, the weight was gone. Marcus blinked through the pain to see the cook, who had apparently found his courage in the interim, pulling Travis off him with help from 2 other male customers. The older man was already at the door, shouting for Travis to come on. "I'll kill you!" Travis was screaming as he was dragged toward the exit. "You hear me? I'll kill you!" The cook and his volunteers shoved Travis out the door, where his companion grabbed him and started pulling him toward a pickup truck parked haphazardly in the lot. Through the diner's windows, Marcus could see Travis still shouting, still trying to come back inside. But his friend was stronger and more sober. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Marcus lay on the filthy diner floor, his entire body throbbing with pain, and tried to remember how to breathe. His ribs felt like they might be cracked. His jaw was already swelling. He was pretty sure he'd torn something in his shoulder. "Daddy!" Lily was suddenly there, her small hands on his face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Daddy, are you okay? Are you okay?" Marcus forced himself to sit up, every muscle screaming in protest. "I'm okay, baby. I'm okay." "You're bleeding." Lily was sobbing now, her fingers touching the cut on Marcus's lip with heartbreaking gentleness. "Just a little," Marcus managed, pulling her into his arms despite the pain it caused. "Just a little bit." Nina knelt beside them, the coffee pot still clutched in her shaking hands. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. This is all my fault." "No." Marcus shook his head, which proved to be a mistake as the world tilted dangerously. "No, it's not your fault. Those men, that wasn't your fault." The police arrived 6 minutes later, their lights painting the diner in alternating shades of red and blue. By then, Marcus had made it to his feet with Nina's help, though he was leaning heavily against the counter. The cook had brought him a bag of frozen peas for his jaw, and someone else had given Lily a milkshake she wasn't drinking. The officers took statements from everyone. Marcus told his story, his voice hoarse, and his words occasionally slurring where his swelling lip made it hard to speak clearly. Nina told hers, breaking down twice and having to start over. The other customers, suddenly brave now that the danger had passed, fell over themselves to describe what they'd seen. Travis and his friend had been caught 3 blocks away. Their truck stopped at a red light. They were arrested on the spot. "You did a brave thing," one of the officers told Marcus as the paramedics checked him over. "Stupid, maybe, but brave." Marcus just nodded. Brave felt like the wrong word. Terrified felt more accurate. Desperate, foolish. The paramedics wanted him to go to the hospital, but Marcus refused. He couldn't afford an ambulance ride and an emergency room visit. He assured them he was fine, that nothing was broken, that he'd take some ibuprofen and rest. It was close to midnight by the time Marcus and Lily finally made it back to their apartment. It was a small place, cramped and poorly insulated, but it was theirs. Marcus got Lily ready for bed, moving slowly and carefully, wincing with each movement. "Daddy?" Lily asked as he tucked her in. "Yeah, baby?" "You were really brave tonight." Marcus smoothed her hair back from her forehead. "I was really scared tonight." "But you helped her anyway." "Yeah," Marcus said softly. "I did." "That's what brave means," Lily said with the absolute certainty that only a 7-year-old could possess. "Mommy told me once, she said being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the right thing even when you are scared." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Your mom was a smart lady." "I know." Lily yawned, her eyes already closing. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, sweetheart." Marcus watched until her breathing evened out into sleep, then limped to his own room. He stood in front of the bathroom mirror, taking inventory of the damage. His jaw was purple and grotesquely swollen. His lip was split. There were bruises forming on his ribs and shoulder. He looked like he'd lost a fight with a brick wall, which, in a way, he had. He took 4 ibuprofen and collapsed onto his bed without bothering to undress. Every part of him hurt. More than the physical pain, though, was the fear that had settled in his chest like a stone. What if he'd been seriously injured? What would happen to Lily then? What if he'd been arrested instead of Travis and his friend? What if he'd lost one of his jobs because of this? Marcus had spent 2 years carefully building a life for himself and his daughter from the ruins of Sarah's death. Tonight, in the space of a few minutes, he'd risked it all. For what? For a waitress he didn't know? For some abstract concept of doing the right thing? His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Marcus picked it up, expecting he didn't know what. Maybe a call from one of his bosses, having somehow heard about the incident. Maybe the police with more questions. Instead, it was a text from an unknown number. "This is Nina. The cook gave me your number. I hope that's okay. I just wanted to say thank you again. You probably saved my life tonight. I'll never forget what you did." Marcus stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back, his thumbs clumsy on the small keyboard. "You're welcome. Stay safe." He set the phone down and closed his eyes. Tomorrow, he'd have to go to work. Tomorrow, he'd have to face whatever consequences came from tonight's choices. Tomorrow, he'd have to keep moving forward, keep holding things together, keep being the father Lily needed him to be. But tonight, lying in the darkness with his body aching and his daughter safe in the next room, Marcus allowed himself a moment to feel something other than fear and exhaustion. Pride, maybe. Or satisfaction. Or just the quiet knowledge that when the moment came, when his daughter asked him to be brave, he hadn't looked away. Outside, the city hummed with its usual night sounds. Inside, Marcus Hale finally let himself rest, unaware that the choice he'd made in that roadside diner would change his life in ways he couldn't possibly imagine. The next morning arrived too soon, announced by Lily jumping on his bed with her usual 7-year-old enthusiasm before she registered the full extent of his injuries. "Daddy, your face!" Marcus groaned, every movement sending fresh waves of pain through his battered body. "Yeah, I know. It looks really bad. Thanks, baby. That's helpful." Lily climbed down more carefully, her expression worried. "Does it hurt a lot?" "Some," Marcus admitted, forcing himself to sit up. The clock read 6:47 a.m. He had to be at the warehouse by 8, and there was no way he was calling in sick. He couldn't afford to lose the hours, and he definitely couldn't afford to draw attention to himself right now. Getting Lily ready for school was an ordeal. Everything took twice as long as usual, his movements slow and stiff. Lily, bless her, tried to help, getting her own breakfast and packing her own backpack without being asked. "Are you sure you're okay to drive?" she asked as they walked to their ancient Honda in the apartment complex's parking lot. "I'm fine," Marcus lied, sliding into the driver's seat with a wince. "Seatbelt." The elementary school drop-off line moved with agonizing slowness. When they finally reached the front, Lily unbuckled but didn't immediately get out. "Daddy, are you going to be in trouble? For what happened?" Marcus turned to look at her, taking in her serious expression, the worry in her eyes that no 7-year-old should have to carry. "No, baby, I'm not in trouble. I promise." "Okay." She leaned over and kissed his cheek, carefully avoiding his bruises. "Have a good day at work?" "You too, sweetheart. Learn something." He watched her run toward the school building, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, and felt the familiar mixture of love and terror that came with being a single parent. Everything he did, every choice he made, had consequences for her. Last night, he'd chosen to help someone at considerable risk to himself. Had that been the right call? Or had it been selfish, putting his daughter's security at risk for a stranger? The warehouse where Marcus worked his day shift was a massive concrete structure on the edge of the industrial district. He clocked in at 7:58, earning a sharp look from his supervisor, Tom, who liked his employees early. "Jesus, Hale," Tom said, taking in Marcus's appearance. "What the hell happened to you?" "I'm fine," Marcus said, heading toward his station. "Just a little accident." "That doesn't look like a little anything." Tom followed him. "You sure you're good to work?" "I'm here, aren't I?" Tom studied him for a moment longer, then shrugged. "Your funeral. But if you can't keep up with your quota, that's on you." The morning was brutal. Marcus's job involved loading and unloading trucks, organizing inventory, and moving heavy boxes from point A to point B. On a good day, it was physically demanding. Today, with his ribs screaming and his shoulder barely functional, it was torture. But Marcus pushed through, gritting his teeth and forcing his body to keep moving. He couldn't afford to slow down, couldn't afford to show weakness. Jobs like this one were easy to lose and hard to replace. By lunch, he was sweating despite the warehouse's February chill, his hands shaking from pain and exhaustion. He found a quiet corner and collapsed against a stack of pallets, too tired to make it to the break room. "You look like death warmed over." Marcus opened his eyes to find Carlos, one of the other warehouse workers, standing over him with a concerned expression. "I'm fine." "Yeah, you keep saying that. Nobody believes you." Carlos sat down beside him. "What happened? Bad breakup?" "Something like that." They sat in silence for a moment. Carlos was in his 50s with grown kids and a wife who packed him elaborate lunches that he often shared. He'd been working at the warehouse for over a decade, one of the few people who seemed content with the job rather than desperately treading water. "You know," Carlos said conversationally, "whatever you did to end up looking like that, I hope it was worth it." Marcus thought about Nina's terrified face, about Lily's voice saying, "Please help her," about the text message thanking him for probably saving a life. "Yeah," he said quietly, "it was worth it." The rest of the shift passed in a blur of pain and determination. By the time Marcus clocked out at 4, he was moving like an old man, each step careful and measured. He had exactly 2 hours before his evening shift started at the distribution center across town. Just enough time to pick up Lily from the after-school program, take her home, and get her situated with dinner before he had to leave again. This was his life, this endless cycle of work and parenting, of barely making ends meet while trying to be present for his daughter. Some days it felt impossible. Today it felt insurmountable. But he did it anyway, because that's what parents did. That's what Sarah would have done, would have expected him to do. Lily was quieter than usual on the drive home, casting worried glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. "I'm okay," he told her for probably the 20th time that day. "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." "Daddy, what if those men come back?" Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. It was a fear he'd been trying not to think about, pushing it down beneath the more immediate concerns of work and pain and keeping his life running. "They won't," he said firmly. "They were arrested. They're in jail. But what about when they get out?" "That's a long time from now, baby." And they don't know where we live. They don't know anything about us. But they know your face. Marcus didn't have a good answer for that. At the apartment, he got Lily set up with leftover spaghetti and her homework at the kitchen table. I have to go to my other job in a few minutes, he said, checking the clock. Mrs. Patterson will be here soon. Mrs. Patterson was their elderly neighbor who watched Lily most evenings in exchange for help with her groceries and occasional household repairs. It wasn't ideal, leaving Lily with a neighbor instead of at home with her father, but it was what Marcus could manage. I know, Lily said, not looking up from her math worksheet. I'll be home by 11. I know. Marcus crouched down beside her chair, ignoring the protest from his ribs. Hey, look at me. Lily turned, her expression guarded. I'm sorry, Marcus said. I'm sorry I have to work so much. I'm sorry I can't be here more. It's okay. No, it's not. But I'm trying. I'm doing the best I can. Lily threw her arms around his neck, nearly knocking him off balance. I know, Daddy. I know you are. They stayed like that for a long moment, Marcus breathing in the little girl's smell of his daughter, watermelon shampoo, and the faint scent of school cafeteria. Then Mrs. Patterson knocked on the door, and Marcus had to let go, had to stand up, had to leave his daughter again to go to his second job. The distribution center was even worse than the warehouse. Here, Marcus worked as a night loader, sorting packages onto delivery trucks according to zip codes and routes. It required speed, accuracy, and constant movement, all things that were significantly harder with a body that felt like it had been through a meat grinder. Dude, you look terrible, his coworker Jake said within the first 5 minutes of shift. I'm aware. Seriously, what happened? It's a long story. And it was. A story that Marcus was starting to realize he'd be telling and retelling, each time trying to make sense of the choices that had led him to this moment. His phone buzzed in his pocket around 8. Marcus wasn't supposed to check his phone during work, but Tom wasn't here, and the distribution center's supervisor was more lenient. He glanced at the screen. Another text from Nina. I don't know if this is weird, but I told my manager what you did. She wants to talk to you. Is that okay? Marcus frowned, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. Why would Nina's manager want to talk to him? Was he in trouble after all? Had he somehow violated some policy by getting involved? Okay, he typed back, because what else could he say? Great. Can you come by the diner tomorrow morning around 10? Her name is Evelyn Carter. Tomorrow morning. Marcus mentally ran through his schedule. He worked at the warehouse until 4, had a few hours with Lily, then back to the distribution center. But tomorrow was Saturday. Lily didn't have school, and he didn't work weekends at the warehouse. Just the distribution center evening shift. I can do that, he responded. Thank you so much. See you then. Marcus pocketed his phone and went back to loading packages, trying not to speculate about what this Evelyn Carter could possibly want. He was too tired for speculation, too tired for worry. He just needed to get through the shift, get home to his daughter, get some sleep, and deal with tomorrow when tomorrow came. But as he worked through the night, his body aching and his mind racing, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his life had shifted somehow. That the moment he'd stood up in that diner, he'd set something in motion that was bigger than a simple confrontation with a couple of drunk men. He just had no idea what. The night shift ended at midnight, and Marcus drove home through empty streets with his windows cracked despite the cold, hoping the February air would keep him awake. His apartment was dark when he arrived, except for the small lamp Mrs. Patterson always left on in the living room. She was dozing in the armchair, her reading glasses sliding down her nose, a romance novel open in her lap. Mrs. Patterson, Marcus said softly, touching her shoulder. She startled awake, blinking rapidly. Oh, Marcus, I didn't hear you come in. How was she tonight? Perfect, as always. Did her homework, ate her dinner, went to bed at 8:30 without a fuss. Mrs. Patterson stood, gathering her book and sweater. Though she did ask me 3 times if you were okay. Marcus's chest tightened. I'm fine. Mrs. Patterson looked at him over her glasses, taking in his bruised face and stiff movements. Of course you are, dear, and I'm 25 years old. She patted his arm gently as she passed, letting herself out with a soft click of the door. Marcus locked it behind her, checked on Lily, who was sleeping peacefully, her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, and then collapsed into bed still wearing his work clothes. He fell asleep almost instantly, but woke 3 hours later from a nightmare he couldn't quite remember, his heart pounding and his sheets soaked with sweat. The apartment was silent around him, filled with the particular quality of darkness that came in the hours before dawn. Marcus lay there staring at the ceiling, his mind racing through scenarios about tomorrow's meeting. Maybe this Evelyn Carter wanted to ban him from the diner. Maybe she was going to threaten him with a lawsuit for disturbing her business. Maybe she just wanted to lecture him about taking the law into his own hands. Or maybe, a small voice in the back of his mind suggested, she wanted to thank him properly. Maybe there was a reward. Maybe this was the universe's way of balancing the scales after 2 years of relentless hardship. Marcus shut down that line of thinking immediately. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment, and he had enough of that without inviting more. When morning finally came, Marcus made pancakes for Lily, managing to flip them without burning his hand despite his exhausted state. They ate together in companionable silence, Lily still in her pajamas, with her hair sticking up in every direction. "I have to go meet someone this morning," Marcus said, pouring more syrup on her plate. "About what happened at the diner." Lily's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Are you in trouble?" "No, at least I don't think so. The waitress I helped, her boss wants to talk to me." "Why?" "I don't know yet, baby. That's what I'm going to find out." Lily considered this, her 7-year-old brain working through the implications. "Can I come?" "Not this time. Mrs. Patterson said she'd watch you for a couple hours." "I'm old enough to stay by myself," Lily said, with the indignation of a child who'd recently discovered the concept of independence. "Nice try. You're 7. Almost 8. Still 7. They finished breakfast, and Marcus got Lily situated next door with Mrs. Patterson, who had an impressive collection of Disney movies and a seemingly endless supply of homemade cookies. Then he drove back to the diner, his stomach churning with anxiety that had nothing to do with his healing injuries. The parking lot was busier than it had been 2 nights ago, filled with the Saturday morning breakfast crowd. Marcus sat in his car for a moment, gathering his courage. Through the diner's windows, he could see families in booths, waitresses moving between tables, the normal rhythm of a restaurant in full swing. No sign of chaos, no evidence that anything out of the ordinary had happened here 48 hours ago. He walked inside, the bell over the door announcing his arrival. Several customers looked up, and Marcus saw recognition flash across a few faces. People who'd been here that night, who'd watched him get beaten on the floor while they did nothing. Their eyes slid away from his almost immediately, returning to their pancakes and coffee with sudden intense interest. Nina appeared from behind the counter, her face lighting up when she saw him. She looked better than she had the other night, rested, composed, though there were shadows under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept much either. "Marcus, thank you for coming." She hurried over, then seemed uncertain whether to shake his hand or hug him, settling for an awkward half gesture that was neither. "How are you feeling?" "I'm all right. Sore, but all right." "I'm so sorry about all this, about what happened to you." "It's not your fault," Marcus said firmly. "None of it." Nina's eyes welled up, but she blinked the tears away. "Ms. Carter is in this back office. This way." She led him through the diner, past the booth where he and Lily had been sitting, past the spot where he'd ended up on the floor with Travis on top of him. The cook nodded at Marcus as they passed the kitchen, a gesture of acknowledgement that Marcus returned. The office was a small room off the kitchen, cramped and cluttered with filing cabinets and stacks of inventory sheets. Behind a desk that looked like it had been salvaged from a yard sale sat a woman in her mid-50s, her dark hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a neat bun. She wore a simple blue sweater and reading glasses that she removed as Marcus entered. "Mr. Hale," she said, standing and extending her hand. "I'm Evelyn Carter. Thank you so much for coming." Her handshake was firm, her gaze direct. Marcus found himself automatically straightening his posture under that assessing look. "Ma'am," he said, because his mother had raised him to be polite even when he was terrified. "Please, sit down." Evelyn gestured to the metal folding chair across from her desk. "Nina, would you mind giving us a few minutes?" "Of course." Nina slipped out, closing the door behind her. Marcus sat, his hands clasped in his lap, feeling like he was about to be fired from a job he didn't even have. Evelyn settled back into her own chair, studying him with an intensity that made him want to squirm. "I own this diner," she said after a moment, "along with 4 others in the state. I also own the distribution company that supplies them, and I sit on the board of several local businesses and charitable organizations. I'm telling you this not to brag, Mr. Hale, but to give you context for what I'm about to say." Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "I've been in business for 32 years, Evelyn continued. I've seen a lot in that time, a lot of people, a lot of situations. And I've learned that the measure of a person isn't what they do when it's easy or when everyone's watching. It's what they do when it's hard, when it would be easier to look away, when there's no reward except knowing you did the right thing." She paused, letting her words settle in the small office. "Nina told me what you did. The police report told me the rest. 37 people in this diner that night, Mr. Hale. 37. And you were the only one who stood up." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Evelyn said sharply. "You did what anyone should do. There's a significant difference. And in my experience, very few people actually do what they should when the moment comes." She opened a folder on her desk, glancing at papers Marcus couldn't see. "I did some research on you, Mr. Hale. I hope you don't mind. When someone shows that kind of character, I like to know who they are." Marcus's stomach dropped. "Research? That couldn't be good." "Ma'am, if this is about—" "You're a widower," Evelyn interrupted gently. "Lost your wife 2 years ago to cancer. You're raising a 7-year-old daughter on your own. You work 2 jobs, warehouse during the day, distribution center at night. No criminal record, not even a parking ticket. You've been late on rent twice in the past year, but always caught up within a week. You volunteer at your daughter's school when you can find the time, which isn't often." Marcus felt exposed, vulnerable, like she'd peeled back the layers of his carefully constructed privacy. "I don't understand why you needed to know all that." "Because, Mr. Hale, I'd like to offer you a job." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus was certain he'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" Evelyn smiled, and it transformed her serious face into something warmer, almost grandmotherly. "A job. Working for me." I appreciate it, but I'm not really a food service person. I don't have experience. I'm not offering you a position as a waiter," Evelyn said. "I'm offering you a position in my security operations division." Marcus blinked. "You're what?" "I run several businesses, as I mentioned. All of them require security, physical security, certainly, but also operational security, safety protocols, emergency response planning. I have a small team that handles this across all my properties. They need a new member." "I don't have any security experience." "You have something better." Evelyn leaned forward, her expression intense. "You have integrity. You have courage. You have the instinct to protect people who need protecting, even at great personal cost. Those things can't be taught, Mr. Hale. Technical skills can be." Marcus's mind was reeling. A job. A real job. 1 job instead of 2. The possibility glimmered in front of him like a mirage. Too good to be real. "What would it pay?" he asked, then immediately felt crass for asking. But he had to know. He had to understand if this was actually real or just some kind of symbolic gesture. Evelyn named a figure that made Marcus's breath catch. It was more than he made at both his current jobs combined. Significantly more. "That includes benefits," Evelyn added. "Health insurance, dental, vision, 2 weeks paid vacation, sick days. A retirement plan if you want it." Marcus couldn't speak. The numbers were spinning in his head, recalculating his life. Health insurance meant he could take Lily to the doctor when she got sick instead of hoping it would pass on its own. Vacation meant he could actually spend time with his daughter. Sick days meant he wouldn't have to drag himself to work when he could barely stand. "I know this is a lot to process," Evelyn said kindly, "and I don't expect an answer right this second. But I want you to know that this offer is genuine. I need good people, Mr. Hale. People I can trust. People who do the right thing even when it's hard." "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it." Say you'll come in on Monday to meet the rest of the security team and see what the job actually involves. Then you can make an informed decision. Monday. That was 2 days away. 2 days to figure out if this was real, if it was sustainable, if he could actually trust this apparent miracle that had walked into his life. There's something else you should know, Marcus said slowly. I have a daughter. I'm a single parent. I can't work nights anymore. I can't miss her school events or leave her alone or... The position is primarily Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, Evelyn interrupted. Occasionally, there might be an evening event that needs security coverage, but we rotate that among the team, and you'd have at least a week's notice. You'd have weekends with your daughter. You'd have time to be a parent. Time to be a parent. Marcus hadn't had that in 2 years. He'd been surviving, providing, keeping them both afloat. But actual time? Time to help with homework and make dinner and just be present? That seemed like a fantasy. Why me? Marcus asked, his voice rough. Why not hire someone with actual experience, someone trained? Evelyn was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. 23 years ago, my daughter was assaulted in a parking lot. She was 19, home from college for the summer, working at one of my first restaurants. A man grabbed her, tried to drag her into his car. There were people around. People saw. But everyone just walked past, looked away, didn't want to get involved. Her voice remained steady, but Marcus could see the pain in her eyes. Except for one person, a busboy named Michael who was taking out the trash. He ran over, he pulled the man off my daughter, he held him until the police came. Michael was 17 years old, weighed maybe 130 pounds soaking wet, and he put himself between my daughter and a predator because it was the right thing to do. Evelyn took off her glasses, wiping them on her sweater, though they didn't appear to need cleaning. I offered Michael a job that day, helped put him through college. He still works for me, actually. He runs my logistics division now. And I promised myself that if I ever saw someone with that same quality, that same willingness to act when others won't, I'd do whatever I could to help them. She put her glasses back on, looking directly at Marcus. You have that quality, Mr. Hale, and I'm not going to let it go to waste if I can help it. Marcus felt something shifting in his chest, a sensation he barely recognized because he'd gone so long without feeling it. Hope. Real, dangerous, terrifying hope. I'll come in Monday, he heard himself say. I'll meet your team. I'll learn about the position. And then, we'll see. That's all I ask. Evelyn stood, extending her hand again. Monday at 9. I'll text you the address. They shook, and Marcus felt the firmness of her grip, the sincerity in her eyes. This was real. This was actually happening. Nina was waiting outside the office, practically vibrating with nervous energy. Well, how did it go? She offered me a job, Marcus said, still processing it himself. Nina squealed, actually squealed, and hugged him before he could prepare himself. Marcus stiffened at the unexpected contact, then awkwardly patted her shoulder. This is amazing. This is perfect. Oh my God, I'm so happy for you. I haven't accepted yet, Marcus cautioned. I'm just going to check it out. But you will. You have to. Ms. Carter is the best person I've ever worked for. She takes care of her people, Marcus. Really takes care of them. Nina pulled back, her eyes shining. And this is all because you helped me. Because you were brave. Don't you see? This is the universe rewarding you. Marcus wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe that good things happen to good people. That doing the right thing led to positive outcomes. But he'd watched his wife waste away in a hospital bed despite being the kindest person he'd ever known. He'd seen too much unfairness to trust in cosmic justice. Still, standing in this diner with Nina beaming at him and Evelyn's job offer echoing in his ears, it was hard not to feel like maybe, just maybe, things were starting to turn around. Thank you, he said to Nina. For telling her. For everything. Thank you for saving my life, Nina replied seriously. I mean that, Marcus. Those men, I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't stepped in. Marcus didn't want to think about that, didn't want to imagine the alternatives, the darker paths that night could have taken. You should get back to work, he said instead. I need to get home to my daughter. Of course. But Marcus, Nina grabbed his hand. Take the job, please. You deserve something good. Marcus drove home in a daze, his mind spinning through possibilities and pitfalls. A job with normal hours. Benefits. Enough money to maybe finally get ahead instead of just treading water. It seemed too good to be true, and in his experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. Mrs. Patterson's door opened before he could knock, and Lily came running out, still in her pajamas despite it being nearly noon. "Daddy, did you get arrested?" "What? No, why would I get arrested?" "Mrs. Patterson said maybe you were in trouble with the lady from the diner." Marcus glanced over Lily's head at Mrs. Patterson, who had the grace to look sheepish. "I may have been speculating," she admitted, possibly out loud, in front of impressionable ears. "I'm not in trouble," Marcus assured Lily, scooping her up despite the protest from his still healing ribs. "Actually, the opposite. She offered me a job." "A job?" Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose. "At the diner?" "No, in security for her businesses." "Security? Like a policeman?" "More like a safety person, making sure her restaurants and buildings are secure." "That sounds dangerous," Mrs. Patterson said worriedly. "It's probably just checking doors and making sure fire extinguishers are up to date," Marcus said, though he actually had no idea what the job entailed. That's what Monday was for. Lily squirmed to be put down. "Does it pay more than your other jobs?" "Yeah, baby, a lot more." "So you wouldn't have to work at night anymore?" The hope in her voice nearly broke his heart. "Maybe not. If I take it." "Why wouldn't you take it?" Lily demanded with 7-year-old logic. "If it pays more and you don't have to work at night, that's better. It's complicated." Adults always say that when they mean they're scared. Marcus looked at his daughter, this small person who saw through him with such clarity it was sometimes frightening. "You're too smart for your own good, you know that?" Mommy used to say that too. They spent the rest of the weekend in a bubble of normalcy. Marcus called his warehouse supervisor and gave his 2 weeks' notice, his hand shaking as he made the call. Tom was surprised, but not particularly upset. Workers came and went in that place like a revolving door. "You got something better lined up?" Tom asked. "Yeah, I think so." "Good for you, Hale. You always worked harder than most. Hope it pans out." The distribution center was harder. Marcus had been there for almost 18 months, longer than most employees lasted. His supervisor, a woman named Diane, who actually seemed to care about her workers, was genuinely disappointed. "You're one of my most reliable guys," she said. "Any chance I can talk you into staying?" "I appreciate that, but no. This new position, it's a real opportunity." "Well, I'm happy for you then. And if it doesn't work out, you've got a place here if you want it." Marcus thanked her, feeling guilty despite knowing he was making the right choice. These jobs had kept him and Lily afloat when they were drowning. Leaving them felt like abandoning a lifeboat while still in the middle of the ocean. Sunday evening, after Lily was in bed, Marcus sat at their small kitchen table with a cup of coffee he wasn't drinking and tried to process the whirlwind his life had become in 72 hours. From a routine dinner at a diner to a violent confrontation to a job offer that could change everything. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Marcus, this is Evelyn Carter. The address for tomorrow is 1247 Industrial Drive, Suite C, Park, in visitor parking, and come to the 3rd floor. Looking forward to seeing you at 9. EC." Marcus typed the address into his phone's maps, seeing that it was about 20 minutes from his apartment, closer than either of his current jobs. He could drop Lily at school and still have time to get there. He allowed himself, just for a moment, to imagine a different life. One where he had time to pack Lily proper lunches instead of giving her money for the cafeteria. Where he could go to her school plays and parent-teacher conferences. Where he wasn't constantly exhausted, constantly worried, constantly one emergency away from financial collapse. It was a dangerous thing to imagine. But after 2 years of just surviving, Marcus let himself hope. Monday morning arrived cold and clear. Marcus dropped Lily at school, watching her run toward her friends with her backpack bouncing, and then drove to 1247 Industrial Drive with his heart in his throat. The building was newer than he'd expected, all glass and steel, with a parking lot that looked recently paved. Marcus parked in a spot marked Visitor and sat for a moment staring at his reflection in the rear-view mirror. His bruises had faded from purple to a sickly yellow-green. His lip was mostly healed. He looked tired, but he always looked tired. He was wearing his best clothes, khakis and a button-up shirt that he'd ironed himself, and he'd trimmed his hair in the bathroom that morning with kitchen scissors. He looked like a man trying very hard to appear more put together than he actually was. "Okay," Marcus said to his reflection, "let's do this." The building's lobby was impressive. Marble floors, modern furniture, a reception desk staffed by a young man in a suit who greeted Marcus with professional courtesy. "I'm here to see Evelyn Carter," Marcus said. "I have a 9 o'clock appointment." "Mr. Hale?" "Yes." "Third floor, suite C. Elevators are just past the fountain." The elevator was smooth and quiet, nothing like the groaning freight elevators at the warehouse. When the doors opened on the third floor, Marcus found himself in a hallway with thick carpet and artwork on the walls that looked expensive. Suite C had frosted glass doors with Carter Security Solutions etched in elegant script. Marcus pushed through into a reception area that was smaller but no less professional than the building's lobby. A woman in her 40s looked up from her computer with a smile. "You must be Marcus Hale. Ms. Carter is expecting you. Conference room is straight back." Marcus followed her directions, his footsteps silent on the carpet, and found himself in a room with a large table, comfortable chairs, and windows overlooking the parking lot. Evelyn was already there, along with 3 other people, 2 men and a woman. "Marcus?" Evelyn stood, gesturing him inside. "Thank you for being punctual. Let me introduce you to the team." The next hour passed in a blur of names and information. There was Michael, the former busboy Evelyn had mentioned, now a confident man in his 40s who managed operations. There was James, ex-military with an air of calm competence, who handled physical security assessments. And there was Patricia, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who managed cybersecurity and digital systems. They explained what Carter Security Solutions actually did: risk assessments for Evelyn's various businesses, safety protocol development, emergency response planning, vendor management for alarm systems and security cameras, and occasional physical presence at events. "We're not bodyguards," James clarified. "We're not expecting gunfights or high-speed chases. Mostly it's paperwork, planning, and making sure everything runs smoothly so problems don't happen in the first place. Though occasionally," Patricia added with a slight smile, "we do get to be the person who asks someone to leave when they're causing a disturbance." "Like a bouncer?" Marcus asked. "More diplomatic than that, but essentially, yes." They showed him the office, explained the systems, walked him through a typical day. It all seemed manageable, professional, normal even. "What do you think?" Evelyn asked as the tour concluded. Marcus looked around at these people, at this clean, organized office, at this opportunity that had fallen into his lap because he'd made one choice in a diner on a Wednesday night. "I think," he said carefully, "that I'm not qualified for this." "That's what training is for," Michael said. "I started as a busboy, remember?" Evelyn has a habit of seeing potential in people before they see it in themselves. "The question isn't whether you're qualified now," Evelyn said. "The question is whether you're willing to learn, whether you're willing to work hard, whether you're the kind of person we want on this team. And I already know the answer to all of those things." Marcus thought about Lily, about the life he could give her with this job, about not being exhausted all the time, about actually being present for the moments that mattered. "Okay," he said. "Yes, I'll take it." Evelyn's smile was genuine and warm. "Excellent. When can you start?" "I have 2 weeks' notice at my current jobs." "That works perfectly. It'll give us time to get your background check processed and your paperwork sorted." She extended her hand. "Welcome to Carter Security Solutions, Marcus." As Marcus shook her hand, he caught his reflection in the conference room window. He still looked tired. He still looked like a man who'd been beaten down by life more times than he could count. But for the first time in 2 years, he also looked like a man who had something to look forward to. The 2 weeks that followed were the longest and strangest of Marcus's life. He worked his final shifts at both jobs with a surreal sense of displacement, like he was watching someone else go through the motions while his mind was already somewhere else entirely. His coworkers treated him differently once word got around that he was leaving for something better, some with genuine congratulations, others with barely concealed resentment that he was escaping while they remained stuck. "Must be nice," one of the warehouse guys muttered as Marcus loaded his last truck on Friday afternoon. Landing some cushy office job. Marcus didn't bother correcting him. There was no point explaining that it wasn't luck, that it had cost him bruised ribs and a split lip and the terror of standing up when everyone else sat down. People saw what they wanted to see. Carlos was different. On Marcus's last day, he pulled him aside during lunch, pressing a carefully wrapped package into his hands. "For your daughter," Carlos said gruffly. "My wife made it." Inside was a hand-knitted scarf in bright purple, Lily's favorite color. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Carlos, you didn't have to—" "I know, but Maria wanted to. She said any man who works 2 jobs to take care of his kid deserves something good." Carlos clasped Marcus's shoulder. "You did good here, Marcus. Don't forget that. And don't forget where you came from." The distribution center was harder to leave. Diane organized a small goodbye gathering during the last break of Marcus's final shift, complete with a sheet cake from the grocery store and a card signed by the entire night crew. Jake, who Marcus had worked alongside for over a year, gave him a firm handshake and a genuine smile. "You're going to do great, man. Just remember us little people when you're running the whole security empire." "It's just one job," Marcus protested, embarrassed by the attention. "It's never just one job," Diane said quietly, handing him an envelope. "Inside jobs change lives. We put together a little something, nothing much, but we wanted you to have it." The envelope contained $300 in cash and more cards than Marcus could count, each with handwritten messages of encouragement and congratulations. He stood there in the break room, surrounded by people he'd worked with in the middle of countless nights, and had to blink hard against the moisture in his eyes. "Thank you," he managed. "All of you. I won't forget this." That Saturday, Marcus took Lily shopping for new clothes. Not from the thrift store where they usually went, but from an actual department store with prices that made him wince even though he could now technically afford them. He had his first paycheck coming from Carter Security. Evelyn had insisted on paying him for the 2 weeks of training even though he hadn't officially started yet. And for once, Marcus let himself spend money without the constant anxiety of whether he'd have enough for rent. Lily tried on outfit after outfit, spinning in front of the dressing room mirror with pure joy on her face. She'd grown so much in the past year that most of her clothes were too small, her pants hitting above her ankles and her sleeves stopping short of her wrists. Marcus had been making do, telling himself they'd get new things when absolutely necessary, always putting it off for another month, another paycheck. "Can I really get all of these?" Lily asked, clutching an armful of shirts and jeans. "Every single one," Marcus confirmed, and the way her face lit up made every bruise he'd sustained worth it 100 times over. They loaded their purchases into the car. New clothes, new shoes, a winter coat that actually fit, even a few toys that Lily had been eyeing but never asked for, and stopped for ice cream on the way home despite the February cold. "Daddy," Lily said, chocolate ice cream smeared on her chin, "are we rich now?" Marcus laughed, the sound surprising him with its genuineness. "No, baby, we're not rich, but we're going to be okay. Better than okay. Because you helped that lady at the diner. Because I helped Nina, yes, and because Ms. Carter gave me a chance." Lily was quiet for a moment, working on her ice cream cone with serious concentration. Then she said, "Mommy would be proud of you." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, stealing his breath. He pulled the car into a parking spot, unable to drive while emotions crashed over him in waves. Sarah. God, he missed her wisdom, her strength, her ability to find joy even in the darkest moments. "You think so?" he asked when he could speak again. "I know so." Lily reached over and patted his hand with sticky fingers. "She told me once that you were the bravest person she knew when she was sick before she went to heaven. She said you were scared, but you never ran away, not even when things got really hard." Marcus hadn't known Sarah had said that, hadn't known his daughter carried those words with her. He pulled Lily into a hug, not caring about the ice cream or the tears or anything except holding this incredible small person who was the best thing he and Sarah had ever created. "I love you so much," he whispered into her hair. So much." "I love you too, Daddy." Monday morning arrived with the weight of new beginnings. Marcus dressed in the new clothes he'd bought himself, actual dress pants and a button-up shirt that fit properly, a belt that didn't have to be pulled to the last hole. He made Lily breakfast, packed her lunch in the new lunchbox they'd picked out together, and dropped her at school with time to spare. "Good luck on your first day," Lily called as she jumped out of the car. "Thanks, baby. Have a good day at school." "I will. You too." Marcus watched her run toward the building, her new backpack bouncing against her shoulders, and allowed himself a moment of pure gratitude. This was real. This was happening. He was about to start a job that would let him be a father instead of just a provider, that would give Lily the stability she deserved. The Carter Security Solutions office felt different now that Marcus was arriving as an employee rather than a visitor. The receptionist, Janet, he'd learned, greeted him with a warm smile and a stack of paperwork to fill out. "Welcome officially. Michael's waiting for you in his office." Michael's office was smaller than the conference room, but comfortable, with photos of his family on the desk and certificates on the wall documenting various security credentials. He looked up when Marcus knocked, gesturing him inside. "First day nerves?" Michael asked with an understanding smile. "Is it that obvious?" "You look like I felt 23 years ago when Evelyn first brought me to corporate. Terrified I was going to mess everything up and prove I didn't belong." Marcus sat in the offered chair, grateful that someone understood. "How long did it take before you stopped feeling like that?" "About 6 months. Then it became normal. Then it became home." Michael leaned back in his chair. "Evelyn told you how I started working for her?" "She mentioned you helped her daughter." "Did she mention I nearly got myself killed doing it? That guy outweighed me by 100 pounds and had me on the ground before I really knew what was happening. I was just a kid who saw someone in trouble and reacted." Michael's expression turned serious. "The point is, I wasn't qualified for any of this either. But Evelyn saw something in me, invested in me, believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, and I'm going to do the same for you." The morning passed in a blur of training materials, system logins, and introductions to vendors and clients. Patricia walked Marcus through the digital security protocols, explaining how they monitored alarm systems across all of Evelyn's properties. James demonstrated the physical security assessment process, showing Marcus checklists and protocols for evaluating everything from lighting to emergency exits. "Most of this is common sense," James explained. "You're looking at places with fresh eyes and asking yourself what could go wrong. Where are the blind spots? Where are the vulnerabilities? Then we develop plans to address them." They broke for lunch at noon, and Michael took Marcus to a small cafe 2 blocks away. Over sandwiches that cost more than Marcus was used to paying but that the company expense account covered, Michael asked about Lily. "She's 7, right? That's a great age. Old enough to be interesting, young enough to still think you're cool." Marcus smiled. "She's the best thing in my life. The only thing that kept me going after Sarah died. Evelyn mentioned you lost your wife. I'm sorry." "Thank you." Marcus took a bite of his sandwich, chewing slowly. "It's been 2 years, but some days it feels like yesterday. Other days it feels like a lifetime ago." "Kids have a way of keeping you grounded in the present," Michael observed. "My youngest is 16 now, and I swear every day is a crisis that requires immediate attention. Helps you not dwell too much on the past or worry too much about the future." "How did you balance it?" Marcus asked. "The job and being a parent, especially when you were first starting out?" Michael considered the question. "Honestly, Evelyn made it possible. She's always been adamant that her employees have lives outside of work. The security field can be demanding, but she structures things so we're not constantly on call unless there's a genuine emergency. You'll work your 40 hours, maybe a little more during busy weeks, but she doesn't expect you to sacrifice your family for the job." It was such a foreign concept after 2 years of sacrifice that Marcus struggled to believe it. "What if something comes up and I need to leave early? For a school thing, or if Lily gets sick?" "Then you leave early. We're a team. If someone needs coverage, someone else steps up. That's how it works. Evelyn built this company on the principle that if you take care of your people, they'll take care of the business." Michael's expression turned knowing. "I can see you don't quite believe me yet. That's okay. You'll see it in action soon enough." The afternoon brought more training, this time focused on the specific properties Marcus would be responsible for monitoring. Evelyn owned 5 diners across the state, 2 small hotels, a commercial office building, and had contracts with several other businesses to provide security consultations. Marcus's role would involve rotating through these properties, conducting assessments, checking in with managers and ensuring all security systems were functioning properly. It's a lot of driving, Patricia warned. You'll want to get comfortable with podcasts. By the time 5 o'clock arrived, Marcus's head was spinning with information. He'd filled out forms, memorized passwords, been issued a company laptop and cell phone, and absorbed more training material than he thought his exhausted brain could handle. Don't try to remember everything at once, James advised as Marcus prepared to leave. It'll come with repetition. First few weeks you'll be shadowing one of us most of the time anyway. Marcus drove to pick up Lily from the after-school program, his mind still processing the day. It had been overwhelming but not unpleasant, challenging but not impossible, and he'd been home by 5:15, early enough that Lily was surprised to see him. "You're here!" She ran to the car, throwing her backpack in the back seat. "How was your first day?" "Good, really good." Marcus pulled out of the parking lot, realizing with a start that he wasn't exhausted. Tired from mental effort, yes, but not the bone-deep exhaustion that had characterized the past 2 years. "How was school?" "We learned about fractions. I hate fractions." "Fractions are important." "That's what Mrs. Henderson said. But I still hate them." They stopped at the grocery store on the way home, and Marcus actually took time to shop instead of just grabbing whatever was quickest and cheapest. He bought fresh vegetables, real fruit instead of canned, chicken breast instead of the cheapest ground beef. The total at checkout made him nervous, despite knowing he could afford it. Years of scarcity not yet ready to release their grip on his psychology. That evening, Marcus cooked dinner with Lily's help. Actual cooking, not just reheating something or throwing together sandwiches. They made chicken stir-fry with vegetables, working together in their small kitchen, with Lily carefully measuring ingredients while Marcus chopped and stirred. "This is fun," Lily announced, stealing a piece of bell pepper. "We should cook together more." "We will," Marcus promised, and realized he actually could. He had time now. Time to cook. Time to help with homework. Time to just be present. After dinner and homework and bath time, Marcus tucked Lily into bed and sat with her in the quiet darkness of her room. "Daddy?" she asked sleepily. "Are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. "Yeah, baby. I'm happy. Are you?" "Uh-huh. Today was a good day." "It was," Marcus agreed, smoothing her hair back. "It really was." He stayed until her breathing evened out into sleep, then retreated to the living room with the stack of training materials Michael had sent home with him. But instead of reading, Marcus found himself just sitting in the quiet apartment, taking in the reality of his new life. For 2 years, he'd been in survival mode, every decision calculated to keep them afloat for one more day, one more week, one more month. There had been no room for dreaming, no space for anything except the immediate and necessary. But now, sitting in his slightly shabby apartment with his sleeping daughter in the next room and a real job waiting for him tomorrow, Marcus let himself imagine something different. Maybe they could move to a better apartment, one in a safer neighborhood with a decent school district. Maybe he could save for Lily's college education, something that had seemed impossibly distant when he could barely cover their weekly expenses. Maybe he could take her on a real vacation, show her the ocean she'd only seen in pictures. Maybe, just maybe, they could build a life instead of just surviving one. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm that felt surreal in its normalcy. Marcus shadowed James through security assessments, learning to evaluate properties with a critical eye. He worked with Patricia on digital systems, understanding how alarm monitoring and camera feeds integrated into their overall security approach. He visited each of Evelyn's properties multiple times, meeting managers and staff, learning the unique challenges of each location. And every day he was home by 5:30. Every evening he cooked dinner with Lily. Every night he tucked her in and read her stories and had the energy to actually engage with her, instead of just going through the motions. Mrs. Patterson noticed the change immediately. "You look different," she said one Saturday when Marcus brought over her groceries as payment for all the evenings she'd watched Lily. "Younger, somehow, less tired." "I feel different," Marcus admitted, "like I can actually breathe for the first time in years." "That job is good for you. That woman who hired you, she sounds like a smart one." Evelyn was indeed smart, Marcus was discovering. She ran her businesses with a combination of shrewd practicality and genuine care for her employees that Marcus had never encountered before. She checked in on him weekly during his first month, asking not just about his work performance, but about Lily, about his adjustment, about whether he needed anything. "You're settling in well," she said during one of their check-ins. "Michael says you have a natural instinct for identifying vulnerabilities." "I'm just trying to think like someone planning to cause trouble," Marcus explained. "What would I look for if I wanted to break in or cause problems?" "That's exactly the right mindset. Some people can learn the technical skills but never develop the intuition. You have both." The praise felt foreign and wonderful. Marcus had spent so long being invisible. Just another warehouse worker, just another night loader, just another struggling single parent, that being seen and valued felt revolutionary. One afternoon in late March, nearly 2 months after he'd started at Carter Security, Marcus was conducting a routine assessment of one of Evelyn's diners when he heard a familiar voice. "Marcus? Marcus Hale?" He turned to find Nina standing near the entrance, her expression delighted. She looked different from that terrible night, more confident, less haunted. She wore scrubs instead of a waitress uniform, and her hair was pulled back in a practical bun. "Nina, I didn't know you worked here now." I'm just picking up lunch. I work at the hospital 3 blocks over." Her smile was radiant. "I started nursing school last month." "That's amazing. Congratulations." "It's because of you," Nina said earnestly. "What you did that night, it reminded me that there were good people in the world. People who stood up. People who cared. I'd been thinking about quitting school, about giving up on nursing because it was too hard and I was too tired. But after that night, I thought if you could be brave enough to help someone you didn't even know, I could be brave enough to chase my dreams." Marcus felt overwhelmed by her words, by the idea that his choice had rippled outward in ways he'd never imagined. "I'm really glad you're pursuing nursing," he managed. "You're going to be great at it. How about you? How's the new job?" "It's good. Really good. Life-changing, honestly." "And your daughter?" "Lily's great. She's doing well in school, making friends. Happy." Nina's eyes glistened. "I'm so glad. You both deserve to be happy. After everything you did, everything you risked, you deserve all the good things." They talked for a few more minutes before Nina had to get back to the hospital. As Marcus watched her leave, he thought about the interconnected nature of their lives, how one moment of choice had altered the trajectory of multiple futures. He'd stood up to help Nina, which had led to Evelyn's job offer, which had changed his and Lily's lives. And Nina, inspired by his actions, had found the courage to pursue her own dreams. It was humbling and terrifying and wonderful all at once. That evening, Marcus picked up Lily from school and surprised her with a trip to the park. The weather was warming, spring finally beginning to assert itself after the long winter. They played on the swings and the slides, Marcus pushing her higher and higher while she shrieked with delighted laughter. "Daddy, watch this," Lily called, hanging upside down from the monkey bars. "I'm watching. Be careful." She dropped down and ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "This is the best day." "Yeah?" Marcus hugged her back. "Why's that?" "Because you're here. Really here. Not tired or sad or thinking about work. Just here with me." Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion. Out of the mouths of 7-year-olds came devastating truths. He had been absent even when present, his mind always on the next shift, the next bill, the next crisis. But now, standing in a park on a March evening with his daughter's arms around him and nowhere else he needed to be, Marcus was fully present. "I'm here," he agreed softly, "and I'm not going anywhere." Later that week, Evelyn called Marcus into her office for their monthly review. He'd been nervous about these meetings initially, worried that each one might be the moment she realized she'd made a mistake hiring him. But Evelyn's reviews were constructive and encouraging, focused on growth rather than criticism. "I've been impressed with your progress," she said, reviewing her notes. "James tells me you completed the Riverside Hotel assessment entirely on your own last week, and your report was thorough and insightful." "I tried to be as detailed as possible." "You succeeded. In fact, I'd like to expand your responsibilities if you're comfortable with it." Evelyn leaned forward. "We've had inquiries from several businesses interested in security consultations. I'd like you to start taking lead on some of these assessments." "Lead? But I've only been here 2 months. And in those 2 months, you've demonstrated competence, reliability, and excellent instincts. Plus, potential clients respond well to you." You have a way of explaining security concerns that doesn't make people feel criticized or defensive. Marcus thought about that. It was true that during property visits, managers and staff seemed comfortable talking to him, sharing their concerns and observations. He'd attributed it to his own working-class background, his ability to relate to people doing difficult jobs for modest pay. "If you think I'm ready," he said carefully, "I do. And Marcus, I don't make offers I don't mean. When I say you're ready, trust that assessment." It was a lesson Marcus was slowly learning, to trust in his own competence, to believe that he belonged in this role. Years of being invisible and undervalued didn't disappear overnight, but with each successful assessment, each positive interaction, each moment of genuine contribution, Marcus's confidence grew. By April, Marcus had settled into a routine that felt sustainable rather than desperate. He'd moved Lily to a new after-school program closer to his office, one with smaller class sizes and more activities. He'd started putting money into savings, actual savings, not just whatever was left over after bills, but intentional amounts set aside for emergencies and future goals. He'd even made friends with some of his co-workers. James invited him to a weekend barbecue where Marcus met James's wife and teenage kids. Patricia asked him to join the company softball team that played in a recreational league every summer. Michael continued to mentor him, sharing insights from his own journey from busboy to executive. The transformation wasn't just professional. Marcus noticed it in himself physically. He'd gained back weight he'd lost during the hardest months after Sarah's death, his face less gaunt and his clothes fitting better. He slept more soundly, no longer jerking awake multiple times a night from anxiety about money or schedules. He smiled more, laughed more, engaged with life rather than just enduring it. Lily flourished too. Her grades improved. She made the school choir and talked excitedly about upcoming performances. She drew pictures that included sunshine and flowers instead of just dark clouds. The tight, worried expression she'd worn for so long gradually relaxed into the open, joyful face of a child who felt secure. One Saturday in late April, Marcus took Lily to visit Sarah's grave for the first time in months. They'd been regularly in the first year after her death, but as Marcus's work schedule had become more demanding, the visits had grown sparse. Now, with time and emotional energy to spare, Marcus felt ready to return. They brought flowers, daisies, Sarah's favorites, and sat on the grass beside the simple headstone. "Hi, Mommy," Lily said softly, arranging the flowers in the built-in vase. "I miss you." Marcus swallowed hard against the lump in his throat. "We both miss you, Sarah. Every day." They sat in silence for a while, listening to birdsong and the distant sound of traffic. Then Lily started talking, telling her mother about school and friends and the new dress she'd gotten for the choir concert. Marcus added his own updates about the job, about their improved situation, about the ways their lives had changed. "I did something brave, like you always said I should," Marcus said quietly. "And it changed everything. I wish you were here to see it. I wish you were here to see Lily growing up so smart and strong. I wish for a lot of things." Lily leaned against his shoulder. "Daddy says you'd be proud of him." Marcus looked down at his daughter. "I do?" "You said it in the car, that Mommy would be proud." "She would be," Marcus confirmed, stroking Lily's hair. "She'd be proud of both of us." As they drove home, Lily asked, "Daddy, do you think Mommy sent Ms. Carter to help us?" It was a complicated question. Marcus didn't know what he believed about an afterlife or divine intervention or the mechanics of how the universe worked, but he knew that Sarah had always believed in choosing hope, in trusting that good things could happen, in doing the right thing even when it was hard. "I think," Marcus said carefully, "that Mommy would say we made our own luck by being brave, but I also think she'd say that good people like Ms. Carter are gifts we should be grateful for." "I'm grateful," Lily announced. "And I'm proud of you, Daddy, just like Mommy would be." Marcus had to pull over because he couldn't see through his tears. He sat in the car with Lily's small hand in his and cried for everything they'd lost and everything they'd found and the impossible grace of starting over. When he could breathe again, when the tears had stopped, Marcus looked at his daughter and saw Sarah in her eyes, in her smile, in the strength that was already evident in someone so young. "I'm proud of you too, baby," he said. So proud I could burst. Please don't burst, Lily said seriously. That would be messy. Marcus laughed, the sound surprised out of him, and pulled back onto the road feeling lighter than he had in years. The future was still uncertain, it always would be, but for the first time since Sarah's death, Marcus felt capable of facing it. More than capable. Almost eager. Because sometimes courage wasn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was just a tired father standing up when everyone else sat down. And sometimes that moment of choice opened doors to possibilities that had seemed forever closed, transforming not just one life but rippling outward in ways impossible to predict or measure. Marcus drove toward home with the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, his daughter singing softly beside him, and felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when his moment had come, he hadn't looked away. The following Monday brought an unexpected development that would test everything Marcus had learned about his new role. He arrived at the office to find Evelyn waiting for him with Michael and James, their expressions serious in a way that immediately put Marcus on edge. "Is everything okay?" Marcus asked, setting down his coffee. "We need to talk about an incident," Evelyn said, gesturing him into the conference room. "One of our properties was broken into over the weekend, the diner where you and Lily were that night." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Was anyone hurt?" "No, thank goodness. It happened after closing, around 2 in the morning. The alarm went off, police responded, but whoever it was had already fled." Evelyn pulled up security footage on the conference room screen. The thing is, they knew exactly what they were doing. They disabled the exterior cameras first, came in through the back entrance, went straight for the office safe. The footage showed shadowy figures moving with practiced efficiency, their faces obscured by masks and hoodies. They worked quickly, methodically, like people who'd done this before. "How much did they get?" Marcus asked. "About $3,000 in cash from the weekend receipts, but that's not what concerns me most." James leaned forward. "This wasn't random. They knew our security setup, knew where the blind spots were, knew the manager keeps weekend cash in that particular safe. This was someone with inside knowledge." Marcus processed this information, his mind already working through the implications. "You think it was an employee?" "We're not making accusations," Evelyn said carefully. "But we need to investigate. And Marcus, I'd like you to take lead on this." "Me? But I've only been here 3 months. Shouldn't James or Michael handle something this serious?" "You have something they don't," Evelyn said. "You worked jobs like the ones our employees work. You understand their lives, their pressures, their perspectives. People will talk to you in ways they won't talk to someone they see as management." Michael nodded in agreement. "When I was starting out, Evelyn had me handle an inventory discrepancy issue for the same reason. The staff trusted me because I'd been where they were. You have that credibility." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about security protocols or risk assessments anymore. This was about real consequences, real losses, potentially real betrayal by someone in Evelyn's employ. "What do you need me to do?" Over the next hour, they developed a plan. Marcus would visit the diner, interview the staff, review the security footage in detail, and try to piece together who might have had both the knowledge and opportunity to orchestrate the break-in. It was investigative work, closer to detective work than anything Marcus had done before. "Be subtle," James advised. "Don't make people feel accused. Just ask questions, observe, listen. Sometimes people reveal more than they realize." Marcus drove to the diner with his heart racing. This was the place where everything had changed for him, where he'd made the choice that had led to his current life. Now he was returning not as a customer, but as an investigator, responsible for uncovering a crime that had violated the trust of the woman who'd given him a second chance. The diner looked different in the late morning light, busier and more cheerful than it had been that Wednesday evening months ago. The same cook was working the grill, and Marcus recognized several of the waitstaff from that night. But Nina wasn't there. She was at nursing school now, her life moving forward in new directions. The manager, a stressed-looking woman in her 40s named Carol, met Marcus in the office. The safe sat open and empty, a visible reminder of the violation. "I still can't believe it happened," Carol said, wringing her hands. "We've never had anything like this, not in the 8 years I've been managing this location." "Walk me through the closing procedure," Marcus said, pulling out his notebook. "Who has access to the safe combination?" "Just me and Evelyn, and corporate, obviously, but that's all digital records." What about the alarm system? Who knows the codes? Carol hesitated. Well, me and the assistant manager, Derek. And I suppose any of the long-term staff might have seen us punch it in at some point, but we're usually careful about that. Marcus made notes, already forming a picture. Tell me about Derek. He's been here about 2 years. Good worker, reliable, shows up on time, handles the difficult customers well. Carol paused. Though he's been stressed lately. Money troubles, I think. He mentioned his wife lost her job last month. Money troubles. Marcus knew that desperation intimately, knew how it could make people consider options they'd normally reject. He'd been there himself, standing on the edge of impossible choices, wondering how to keep his daughter fed and housed. I'd like to talk to him, Marcus said, and the rest of the staff who were working that night. Can you set that up? Over the next several hours, Marcus conducted interviews in the diner's break room. He talked to waitresses and cooks, dishwashers and bussers, asking careful questions about the night of the robbery, about who'd noticed anything unusual, about the general atmosphere of the workplace. Most people were cooperative but nervous, uncomfortable with being questioned. Marcus tried to put them at ease, sharing bits of his own story, establishing common ground as someone who'd worked hard jobs for low pay. I'm not here to get anyone in trouble, he said repeatedly. I'm just trying to understand what happened so we can prevent it from happening again. Derek, the assistant manager, was a tall man in his early 30s with dark circles under his eyes and the jittery energy of someone running on caffeine and stress. When Marcus asked to speak with him, Derek's hand shook slightly as he sat down. I already told the police everything I know, Derek said defensively. I'm sure you did. I'm just following up, making sure we haven't missed anything. Marcus kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. Carol mentioned you've been dealing with some financial stress lately. Derek's jaw tightened. My wife lost her job. We've got 2 kids and a mortgage. It's been tough, but we're managing. I understand. I've been there myself. Single parent, working 2 jobs just to keep my head above water. It's exhausting. Something in Derek's expression shifted, a recognition of shared experience. It really is. Some days I don't know how we're going to make it through the month. The break-in happened on a night you were closing, right? Yeah. I locked up around 11:30, set the alarm, everything normal. I checked the doors twice like I always do. Derek leaned forward, his voice urgent. I swear, Marcus, everything was secure when I left. I don't know how they got in. Marcus studied him, trying to read truth from deception. Derek seemed genuinely distressed, but people under financial pressure could be excellent actors when necessary. Still, Marcus's instincts, the same instincts Evelyn had praised, told him Derek was telling the truth. Did you notice anyone unusual hanging around lately? Someone paying too much attention to the security setup? Derek thought about it. There was this guy, maybe 3 weeks ago. He came in for coffee, sat in that booth by the kitchen for over an hour. I noticed because he kept looking around like he was studying the place. I thought maybe he was thinking about applying for a job, but he never asked. Can you describe him? White guy, maybe late 20s, shaved head, tattoos on his neck. Derek paused. Actually, now that I think about it, he looked familiar, like maybe I'd seen him before. Marcus's pulse quickened. Shaved head, neck tattoos. That description matched Travis, one of the men who'd harassed Nina. The men Marcus had fought. The men who'd been arrested. When were those guys released? Marcus asked Carol after finishing with Derek. The ones who were arrested for harassing Nina. Carol pulled up the information on her computer. Travis Melnick was released on bail 3 days after his arrest. His friend, Bobby Krause, got out the same day. Their trial isn't until next month. 3 weeks ago would have been about the right time frame for Travis to scope out the diner, to plan revenge not just against Marcus, but against the establishment that had been the scene of his humiliation. Marcus called James from his car, explaining his theory. It fits, James agreed. Revenge mixed with opportunity. He knows the place because he was there that night. Maybe he noticed details about the security setup while he was causing trouble. But how would he know about the safe? About the procedures? Could have asked around, could have come back during business hours, struck up conversations with employees. People talk, especially to someone who seems friendly and interested. Marcus spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing security footage from the weeks leading up to the break-in. And there, buried in hours of mundane recordings, he found it. Travis sitting in that booth Derek had mentioned, his eyes tracking the staff movements, watching Carol enter and exit the office, observing the closing routine through the diner's windows from the parking lot on multiple nights. It was all there, a pattern of surveillance that Marcus recognized because he'd been trained to look for exactly this kind of behavior. Travis had been planning this for weeks, using his knowledge from that first night and building on it with careful observation. "We need to call the police," Marcus told Evelyn when he reported his findings that evening. "This is beyond our scope." "Agreed. But Marcus, this is excellent work. You connected dots that weren't obvious, used your knowledge of the situation to develop a theory that the evidence supports. This is exactly the kind of analytical thinking we need." The police took Marcus's report seriously, especially when he provided the security footage showing Travis's multiple visits. They coordinated with Travis's bail officer, and within 48 hours, Travis was back in custody, this time with additional charges for burglary and violating his bail conditions. The stolen money was never recovered, but the sense of violation began to heal once the perpetrator was identified and arrested. Evelyn upgraded the security system at all her diners, adding cameras to eliminate blind spots and implementing new procedures for cash handling. Through it all, Marcus found himself thinking about Travis, about the choices that had led a man to throw away his freedom for $3,000 and petty revenge. It could have been him, Marcus realized. If circumstances had been different, if desperation had pushed him in another direction, if he'd made different choices when life got hard. But he hadn't. He'd chosen to stand up instead of looking away, to help instead of walking past, to trust in the possibility of better things instead of succumbing to bitterness and rage. And that choice had made all the difference. 2 weeks later, Marcus was surprised by a knock on his office door late on a Friday afternoon. He looked up to find Evelyn standing there with an envelope in her hand and an expression he couldn't quite read. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. "Of course." Evelyn came in and closed the door behind her, which was unusual. She sat in the chair across from his desk, the envelope resting on her lap. "I want to talk to you about something, and I want you to hear me out before you respond." Marcus felt anxiety spike through him. This sounded like the prelude to bad news. "Okay. You've been with us for 4 months now. In that time, you've exceeded every expectation I had when I hired you. The work you did on the diner break-in was exemplary. Your security assessments are thorough and insightful. Your relationships with our property managers are strong. You're a valuable member of this team." "Thank you," Marcus said cautiously, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "I've been thinking about expanding our operations. We've had increasing demand for security consultations from businesses outside my own properties. I'd like to develop a dedicated consulting division, and I'd like you to help me build it." Marcus stared at her. "Me? But I've only been in security for 4 months." "You've been in security for 4 months. You've been understanding people and identifying problems your entire life." Evelyn leaned forward. "I'm not offering this lightly, Marcus. This would be a significant expansion of your role. More responsibility, more autonomy, eventually managing your own team. It would also come with a substantial raise." She handed him the envelope. Inside was a formal offer letter with a salary that made Marcus's hands shake. It was more than double what he was currently making, more money than he'd ever imagined earning. "I can't accept this," Marcus said automatically. "It's too much. I'm not qualified." "That's the same thing Michael said when I promoted him. And Patricia. And James. Do you see a pattern here?" Evelyn's smile was gentle but firm. "I don't offer opportunities to people who aren't ready for them. And I don't invest in people I don't believe in." Marcus looked at the offer letter, at the numbers that could transform his and Lily's life, from comfortable to genuinely secure. He thought about college funds and better housing, and maybe even a vacation somewhere Lily had never been. But more than that, he thought about trust. Evelyn was trusting him with something important, believing in his potential even when he struggled to believe in it himself, just like Sarah used to do, just like Lily did every single day. "Can I think about it over the weekend?" Marcus asked. "Take all the time you need. This isn't a decision to rush." That evening, Marcus picked up Lily from her after-school program and took her to their favorite pizza place. Over pepperoni slices and root beer, he tried to explain the opportunity without overwhelming her with details she was too young to fully understand. "So it's like a promotion?" Lily asked, cheese stretching from her slice to her mouth. Yeah, kind of. It would mean more responsibility at work, but also more money, enough that we could move to a nicer apartment, maybe one with a yard. Lily's eyes lit up. A yard? Could we get a dog? Marcus laughed. Maybe, if you prove you're responsible enough to take care of one. I'm responsible. I do my homework and clean my room and everything. Most of the time, Marcus amended, but we can talk about the dog possibility. They finished their pizza, and Lily grew quiet, her expression thoughtful in that way that meant she was processing something important. Daddy, are you scared? She finally asked. The question caught Marcus off guard. About the new job? A little, yeah. It's a big change, but you'll do it anyway, right? Because being scared doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. Marcus looked at his daughter, at this wise 7-year-old who somehow understood courage better than most adults. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice it more now because you're not so tired all the time. The truth of that statement hit Marcus squarely in the chest. He had been so consumed by exhaustion and stress that he'd missed things, important things, about his daughter's growth and wisdom and incredible perceptiveness. You're right, he said softly. About all of it. I am scared, but I'm going to do it anyway, because that's what brave people do. Like when you helped Nina. Yeah, like that, Lily grinned, triumphant. So we're getting a dog. We're discussing the possibility of maybe considering thinking about a dog. That's basically a yes. Marcus couldn't help but smile. Sarah would have loved this version of Lily, confident and joyful and full of life. Would have loved seeing Marcus finally able to be the father he'd always wanted to be. On Monday, Marcus accepted Evelyn's offer. The promotion wouldn't take full effect for another month, giving him time to finish his current assessments and begin the transition to building the consulting division. It felt surreal and terrifying and absolutely right all at once. Over the following weeks, Marcus worked closely with Evelyn to develop the framework for their expansion. They outlined service offerings, developed pricing structures, created marketing materials. Marcus discovered he had a knack for business development, for understanding what potential clients needed and how to communicate Carter Security's value proposition. You're a natural at this, Evelyn said during one of their planning sessions. You understand people's fears and concerns because you've lived them. That empathy translates into trust, and trust is the foundation of any successful business relationship. Their first major client came in mid-June, a small chain of convenience stores concerned about employee safety and theft prevention. Marcus conducted the initial assessment personally, walking through each location with the owner and identifying vulnerabilities while offering practical, cost-effective solutions. I can't afford some elaborate system, the owner said. I need something that works but doesn't bankrupt me. I understand, Marcus replied. And he did. He remembered all too well the calculus of trying to protect what little you had while knowing you couldn't afford the best protection. Let me show you some options that fit your budget while still significantly improving your security. The resulting proposal was thorough, realistic, and perfectly calibrated to the client's needs and resources. They signed the contract within a week, and Marcus had his first successful consultation on the books. More clients followed. Word spread about Carter Security's new consulting services, about the guy who really understood small business concerns, who didn't try to oversell or intimidate, but instead offered genuine solutions. Marcus found himself busier than he'd been since taking the job, but it was a good busy, a purposeful busy. And through it all, he maintained his commitment to being present for Lily. He attended her choir concert, sitting in the audience with his phone recording while she sang her heart out on stage. He volunteered for field trip supervision, chaperoning a class visit to the Science Museum. He made it to parent-teacher conferences and school assemblies and all the small moments that made up a childhood. Mr. Hale, Lily's teacher told him during their spring conference, I can't tell you how much difference I've seen in Lily this year. She's more confident, more engaged. Whatever you're doing at home, it's working. What he was doing at home was being there, actually there, not just physically present, but emotionally available. It turned out that was what Lily had needed all along. Not expensive things or elaborate activities, just her father's time and attention and love. In early July, Marcus and Lily moved to a new apartment in a better neighborhood. It had 2 bedrooms instead of 1, a small yard, and was within walking distance of a park with an actual playground. The rent was higher, but Marcus could afford it now without the constant anxiety that had characterized his previous financial decisions. On moving day, Mrs. Patterson came to see them off, tears streaming down her face. "I'm going to miss having you next door," she said, hugging Lily tightly. "But I'm so proud of how far you've both come." "You'll have to visit," Lily insisted, "and we're only 20 minutes away. I'll visit every week if you'll have me." Marcus hugged her too. This woman who'd watched his daughter countless evenings, who'd been there during the hardest times, who'd shown them kindness when they desperately needed it. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. I couldn't have made it through without you." "Yes, you could have," Mrs. Patterson said firmly. "You're stronger than you know, Marcus Hale. You always were." The new apartment felt huge after their cramped studio. Lily ran from room to room, delighting in having her own bedroom, her own closet, her own space to decorate however she wanted. "Can we paint my room purple?" she asked. "We'll have to ask the landlord, but probably yes." "And get that desk we saw at the furniture store?" "Already ordered. It'll be delivered next week." Lily threw her arms around Marcus's waist. "This is the best home ever." "Yeah," Marcus agreed, looking around at the empty rooms that represented so many possibilities, so many new beginnings. "Yeah, it really is." That night, after they'd set up Lily's bed and unpacked enough boxes to make the place livable, Marcus stood on the small porch attached to their unit and looked up at the stars. The city lights obscured most of them, but a few bright points still shone through. He thought about the past 6 months, about how completely his life had transformed, from 2 jobs and constant exhaustion to a career with genuine growth potential, from barely scraping by to actual financial stability, from survival mode to something that felt remarkably like thriving. And it had all started with one choice in a diner, one moment when he could have looked away but didn't, one decision to be brave when being scared would have been so much easier. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text from Evelyn. "Congratulations on the new place. You've earned every good thing coming your way. See you Monday." He smiled, pocketing the phone, and went back inside to where Lily was setting up her stuffed animals in her new room, chattering about how she'd arrange her books and where her drawings should go on the walls. This was his life now. This was what courage had built, and standing in the doorway of his daughter's room in their new home, Marcus finally allowed himself to believe he deserved it. The summer passed in a golden haze of normalcy that Marcus still sometimes couldn't quite believe was real. He'd wake up in the morning in their new apartment, sunlight streaming through windows that actually faced east instead of a brick wall, and have to remind himself that this wasn't temporary, wasn't a dream he'd wake from to find himself back in that cramped studio working 2 jobs. By August, the consulting division had grown beyond Marcus's initial expectations. They'd signed 12 clients, ranging from small retailers to a mid-sized manufacturing facility concerned about industrial espionage. Marcus had hired 2 additional consultants to help with the workload, both of them people with unconventional backgrounds similar to his own, a former grocery store manager with an eye for operational vulnerabilities, and a retired teacher who'd spent years understanding crowd dynamics and safety protocols in schools. "You're building something special here," Evelyn told him during their quarterly review. "Not just a profitable division, but a team that genuinely cares about the people they're protecting." Marcus looked at the reports spread across the conference table, at the growth charts and client testimonials and revenue projections. 6 months ago, he'd been loading trucks in a warehouse. Now he was running a division of a security company, making decisions that affected multiple businesses and the safety of hundreds of people. "I keep waiting for someone to realize I have no idea what I'm doing," Marcus admitted. Evelyn laughed, the sound warm and understanding. "That feeling never completely goes away. I've been running businesses for 30 years and I still have moments of doubt. The difference is learning to trust yourself anyway." It was a lesson Marcus was slowly absorbing. Each successful client relationship, each problem solved, each crisis averted, built his confidence in increments. He was learning to trust his instincts, to believe that his perspective, forged in working-class reality and single-parent desperation, was valuable rather than something to overcome. One afternoon in late August, Marcus was reviewing a security proposal when his office phone rang. The receptionist's voice came through, slightly uncertain. "Marcus, there's someone here to see you. She says her name is Nina Peterson and that you know her." Marcus felt a smile spread across his face. "Send her back," Nina appeared in his doorway moments later, and Marcus barely recognized her. The scared, exhausted waitress from that February night had been replaced by someone radiating confidence and purpose. She wore scrubs with the badge clipped to the pocket identifying her as a nursing student at County Hospital, and her face glowed with the particular satisfaction of someone pursuing their calling. "Nina, come in, please." She entered, looking around his office with wide eyes. "Wow, this is really nice. You've done well for yourself." "I've been lucky," Marcus said, gesturing for her to sit. "It's not luck." Nina settled into the chair across from his desk. "Luck is winning the lottery. What you did was earn it." They talked for nearly an hour, catching up on the months since they'd last spoken. Nina was thriving in nursing school, top of her class, already being recruited by several hospitals for positions after graduation. She'd met someone, another nursing student named David, who made her laugh and supported her dreams. Her life was completely different from what it had been that night in the diner. "I came to thank you properly," Nina said. "I know I've said it before, but I wanted you to understand what you really did that night. You didn't just stop those men. You reminded me that there were people in the world worth believing in, people who stood up when it mattered." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "You would have found your way without me." "Maybe, but it would have taken longer, been harder. You gave me hope at a moment when I was ready to give up on everything. School, my dreams, my faith in people. That's not a small thing, Marcus." After Nina left, Marcus sat in his office thinking about the ripple effects of choices. He'd helped Nina, which had led to Evelyn's job offer, which had changed his and Lily's lives, which had allowed him to build something that was now helping other businesses and families. One moment of courage, radiating outward in ever-widening circles of consequence. His phone buzzed with a text from Lily's school. Parent-teacher conferences were coming up in 2 weeks, and they wanted to schedule his appointment. Marcus checked his calendar and replied immediately with his availability, something he never could have done when he was juggling 2 jobs and barely keeping his head above water. That evening, he picked up Lily from the after-school program she'd started attending at their new neighborhood community center. She came running out with paint on her hands and excitement in her eyes. "Daddy, guess what? Mrs. Chen says I'm really good at art and I should take the advanced class next semester." "That's wonderful, baby. You want to take it?" "Yes, but it costs extra. Is that okay?" A year ago, that question would have filled Marcus with dread, forcing him to calculate whether they could afford $50 a month for art classes, or if that money needed to go toward groceries or utilities. Now, he just smiled. "Of course it's okay. If you love it and you're good at it, we'll make it work." They stopped at the grocery store on the way home, and Marcus let Lily pick out ingredients for the dinner she wanted to make: spaghetti and meatballs from scratch, with garlic bread and a salad. They cooked together in their new kitchen, which had actual counter space and a stove with all 4 burners working, and Marcus listened to Lily chatter about her day while he chopped vegetables. This was what he'd been fighting for all along without quite realizing it. Not just survival, not just keeping them housed and fed, but moments like this. Ordinary, precious, unremarkable moments that made up a real childhood, a real life. After dinner, while Lily worked on homework at the kitchen table, Marcus's phone rang. It was James from work, and the tension in his voice immediately put Marcus on alert. "We've got a situation at the Riverside Hotel. The night manager called in sick, and the backup manager just quit mid-shift. There's a large event tomorrow, a wedding with 200 guests, and no one with security clearance to oversee it." Marcus's mind raced through options. What about Patricia? "She's out of state at her sister's wedding. Michael's got that conference in Chicago. I've got my daughter's surgery tomorrow. We scheduled it months ago." "Right, of course. Don't worry about it. I'll handle it." "You sure? I know you don't like working weekends." "It's fine. One weekend won't kill me." Marcus hung up and looked at Lily, who was watching him with knowing eyes. "You have to work tomorrow," she said. Not a question, but a statement. "Yeah, baby. I'm sorry. There's an emergency and everyone else is busy." Lily's face fell for just a moment before she visibly composed herself. "It's okay. Mrs. Patterson said she'd love to have me over any time. We'll do something special on Sunday, I promise. Whatever you want. Can we go to the aquarium? Sarah Mitchell went last month and said it was amazing." "The aquarium it is." Marcus called Mrs. Patterson, who was delighted to watch Lily for the day. Then he spent the evening reviewing the security protocols for the Riverside Hotel and the specific requirements for the wedding event. It was a high-profile affair. The bride's father was a local businessman with concerns about uninvited press and crashers, which meant Marcus needed to be particularly thorough. The next morning, Marcus dropped Lily off at Mrs. Patterson's apartment with a bag of activities and snacks. "Have fun, baby. Be good." "I'm always good," Lily said with exaggerated innocence, making Mrs. Patterson laugh. The Riverside Hotel was in controlled chaos when Marcus arrived. The event coordinator was near tears, the catering staff was behind schedule, and the florist had just discovered that half the arrangements had been delivered to the wrong venue. Marcus spent the first hour just calming people down and helping coordinate solutions to immediate problems, using skills he'd developed managing crises in his previous jobs. By the time the wedding guests started arriving, Marcus had the security situation well in hand. He'd positioned himself at the main entrance with a guest list, checking invitations, and politely but firmly turning away the 3 photographers who tried to sneak in. He monitored the event space, keeping an eye out for any disturbances or potential problems. The wedding itself was beautiful. Marcus watched from his position at the back of the ballroom as the couple exchanged vows, as the bride's father gave a toast that had half the room in tears, as 200 people celebrated love and commitment and new beginnings. There was something poignant about witnessing joy from the sidelines, about being the person who made sure that joy could happen safely and without interruption. During the reception, Marcus was doing a perimeter check when he encountered the father of the bride in a quiet hallway. The man looked exhausted but happy, loosening his tie and taking a moment away from the celebration. "Mr. Hale?" He extended his hand. "Richard Chen. I wanted to thank you personally for stepping in today. When our regular contact said you'd be handling security, I looked into your background. Impressive what you've built in such a short time." "Thank you, sir. Your daughter's wedding is beautiful. She's my only child. I wanted everything to be perfect for her." Richard's expression grew thoughtful. "I heard about what you did at that diner back in February, how you stood up for that waitress." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He still didn't know how to respond when people brought up that night, when they treated him like some kind of hero instead of just a father who'd done what he thought was right. "I just did what anyone should do. But most people don't. That's what makes it remarkable." Richard pulled out a business card. "I run a foundation that provides scholarships to children of single parents, kids who are working hard despite difficult circumstances. I'd like to talk to you about joining our board." Marcus stared at the card. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for that. You're a single parent who worked multiple jobs while raising a daughter, who showed courage when it mattered, who's building something meaningful with the opportunities you've been given. You're exactly who we need on that board." Richard smiled. "Think about it. Give me a call when you're ready to talk." The rest of the evening passed smoothly. The wedding ended without incident, guests departed happy and safe, and Marcus drove home as the sun was setting over the city. He picked up Lily from Mrs. Patterson's, listening to her enthusiastic recap of their day together. "We made cookies and watched 2 movies, and she taught me how to knit. Look." Lily held up a lumpy, uneven rectangle of purple yarn that was supposed to be a scarf. "I made this for you." Marcus took the scarf with appropriate reverence. "It's perfect. I'll wear it all winter." "It's too small. It'll barely go around your neck once." "Then it'll be my favorite neck warmer." Sunday brought their promised trip to the aquarium. Marcus and Lily spent hours wandering through exhibits, watching jellyfish pulse through darkened tanks and sea otters play in their habitat. Lily pressed her face against the glass of the shark tunnel, delighted and terrified in equal measure. "Did you know sharks have been around for 400 million years?" she informed Marcus, reading from the placard. "That's older than dinosaurs." "I did not know that." "Well, now you do. You learn something new every day." They ate lunch in the aquarium cafe, overpriced sandwiches that tasted like cardboard but that Lily devoured with enthusiasm. Then they visited the touch tanks, where Lily cautiously petted a ray and squealed when a sea cucumber squirted water at her. On the drive home, Lily fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from excitement and stimulation. Marcus glanced at her in the rearview mirror, at her peaceful face and the contentment evident even in sleep, and felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. This was what he'd been fighting for, this exact moment, his daughter happy and safe and having the kind of childhood she deserved, the kind of childhood Sarah would have wanted for her. The following week brought an unexpected phone call from the district attorney's office. Travis Melnick's trial was finally scheduled, and they wanted Marcus to testify about the original incident at the diner and how it connected to the subsequent break-in. It's important that the jury understands the full context, the prosecutor explained, that this wasn't just a random burglary, but a targeted act of revenge stemming from the original assault. Marcus agreed to testify, though the thought of seeing Travis again made his stomach churn. He'd been trying not to think about that night, about the fear and violence and the very real possibility that things could have gone much worse. The trial was scheduled for late September. In the weeks leading up to it, Marcus threw himself into work, expanding the consulting division and developing new service offerings. He hired another consultant, a former social worker with expertise in vulnerability assessments for nonprofit organizations. The team was coming together beautifully, each person bringing unique perspectives and skills. Evelyn pulled him aside one afternoon as he was leaving the office. "I've been thinking about succession planning," she said without preamble. "I'm not getting any younger, and I want to make sure everything I've built continues after I'm gone." Marcus felt a flutter of anxiety. "Are you okay? Is something wrong?" "I'm fine, just being practical." Evelyn smiled. "Michael is going to take over the operational side of the business when I retire, but I need someone to run the security division, someone who understands the mission behind what we do. I'd like that person to be you." The words took a moment to sink in. "You want me to run the entire security division?" "Not immediately. In 5 years, maybe 7. But I want to start preparing you now. Additional training, more strategic involvement, gradually increasing responsibilities." Evelyn's gaze was steady and serious. "I don't make this offer lightly, Marcus. I'm not looking for someone who can just manage the business. I'm looking for someone who will protect what it stands for, taking care of people, investing in potential, doing the right thing even when it's harder than the alternative." Marcus thought about the scared, exhausted man he'd been 8 months ago, thought about how impossible this conversation would have seemed back then, how far beyond his imagination a future like this would have been. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it. Say you'll continue to grow and learn and push yourself. Say you'll trust that I'm not wrong about you." "I'll do all of that," Marcus promised. The night before he was scheduled to testify, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering every detail of that February evening, Travis's hands on Nina, the fear in Lily's voice, the pain of hitting the diner floor, the terrifying uncertainty of whether he'd made the right choice. Around 2 in the morning, he gave up on sleep and went to check on Lily. She was sprawled across her bed in her new purple-painted room, one arm hanging off the side, her stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. Marcus adjusted her blanket and kissed her forehead, breathing in the little girl scent of her. "I love you, baby girl," he whispered. "Everything I did, everything I do, it's all for you." The courthouse was imposing and cold, all marble floors and echoing hallways. Marcus sat on a bench outside the courtroom, trying to calm his racing heart. The prosecutor found him there and ran through what to expect, what questions would be asked, how to handle cross-examination. "Just tell the truth," she advised. "That's all you need to do." The courtroom was smaller than Marcus had expected from television, more intimate and somehow more real. Travis sat at the defense table in an ill-fitting suit, looking older and more worn than Marcus remembered. Their eyes met briefly, and Marcus saw recognition flash across Travis's face, followed by something that might have been shame. Marcus was sworn in and took the witness stand, his hands shaking slightly as he placed them on the Bible. The prosecutor was gentle, walking him through that night step by step. Marcus described seeing the harassment, Lily asking him to help, his decision to intervene. "And what happened when you approached the defendant?" the prosecutor asked. "He shoved me, told me to mind my own business. Then he attacked me." "Were you injured in this attack?" "Bruised ribs, split lip, various contusions, nothing permanent." "And you have a young daughter who witnessed this violence?" "Yes. She was 7 at the time. She saw everything." The defense attorney's cross-examination was more aggressive, trying to paint Marcus as someone who'd provoked the confrontation, who'd been looking for trouble. But Marcus stuck to the truth, explaining calmly and clearly exactly what had happened and why he'd made the choices he'd made. Isn't it true, Mr. Hale, that you could have simply called the police instead of putting yourself in danger? I suppose I could have, but the waitress was terrified and the situation was escalating. By the time the police arrived, something worse might have happened. So you took it upon yourself to play hero? Marcus considered that. No, I was scared the entire time. I just couldn't live with myself if I did nothing and someone got hurt. The prosecutor called Nina next, and her testimony was powerful and emotional. She described her fear that night, her gratitude for Marcus's intervention, her belief that he'd saved her from serious harm. She also testified about seeing Travis in the diner in the weeks before the break-in, corroborating Marcus's theory about the revenge motive. The trial lasted 3 days. In the end, the jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning with guilty verdicts on all counts: assault, battery, burglary, violation of bail conditions. Travis was sentenced to 8 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 5. Marcus felt no satisfaction in the verdict, only a quiet relief that this chapter was finally closing. As he left the courthouse, Nina caught up with him on the steps. "Thank you for testifying," she said. "I know that wasn't easy. Neither was yours. I wanted to tell you something. I got my first job offer. County Hospital wants me on their trauma unit after I graduate. It's because of you, Marcus. All of it. Because you showed me that courage matters, that standing up for what's right matters." Marcus hugged her, this young woman whose life had intersected with his for one terrible moment that had somehow transformed into something redemptive for both of them. "You're going to be an incredible nurse," he said. "Those patients are lucky to have you." That evening, Marcus took Lily to their favorite pizza place to celebrate the trial being over. She'd known about it, though Marcus had tried to shield her from the details, and she'd been worried about him all week. "Is the bad man going to jail?" she asked over breadsticks. "Yes, baby, for a long time." "Good. He shouldn't have hurt you, or that lady." "No, he shouldn't have." Lily was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Daddy, do you think you'll ever have to be brave like that again?" Marcus thought about courage, about the different forms it took. The dramatic kind that got you beaten up in diners, yes, but also the quieter kind, showing up for your child every day, pushing through exhaustion and fear, choosing hope when despair would be easier. "I hope not in that exact way," he said honestly. "But I think we have to be brave all the time, just in smaller ways. Being brave is getting up every day and trying to do the right thing, even when it's hard. Like going to work when you're tired, or telling the truth even when you might get in trouble." Exactly like that. October brought cooler weather and falling leaves and a phone call from Richard Chen about that foundation board position. Marcus met with the board members and was overwhelmed by their mission, providing educational opportunities for children facing the same challenges he and Lily had faced. He accepted the position, adding it to his growing list of responsibilities, and immediately began thinking about how to expand their reach. At his suggestion, they created a scholarship specifically for children of single parents who'd lost a spouse, naming it in Sarah's memory. The first recipient was a high school senior whose mother had died of cancer, just like Lily's, leaving her father to raise 3 kids alone. Marcus met them at the award ceremony and saw himself in the father's exhausted gratitude, saw Lily in the daughter's determined hope. "Thank you," the father said, shaking Marcus's hand. "This scholarship, it's going to make the difference between my daughter going to college or having to work full-time to help support the family." "I know what that's like," Marcus said quietly. "The weight of being the only one standing between your kids in hardship. But you're doing it. You're keeping them together and safe and loved. That's what matters." The man's eyes filled with tears. "Some days I don't know if I can keep doing it." "You can, and you will, because that's what parents do. We keep going even when we think we can't because our kids need us to." Marcus drove home that evening thinking about resilience, about the countless single parents struggling in silence, working multiple jobs and making impossible choices, and somehow finding the strength to keep their families afloat. He'd been one of them. He understood their desperation and their determination in ways that statistics and reports could never capture. Thanksgiving arrived with an invitation from Evelyn to join her and Michael's families for dinner. Marcus brought Lily and Mrs. Patterson, who'd become such an integral part of their lives, that leaving her alone for the holiday was unthinkable. They gathered around a huge table with Evelyn's extended family, sharing food and stories and laughter. Michael raised his glass for a toast. To second chances and the people who give them. To Evelyn, who sees potential where others see limitations. And to Marcus, who reminds us that courage is sometimes just standing up when everyone else sits down. Everyone drank, and Marcus felt his face flush with embarrassment and pride. Lily squeezed his hand under the table. "You're famous, Daddy," she whispered. "I'm not famous, baby. I'm just lucky." "You always say that, but it's not just luck. You worked hard, and you were brave, and you earned all the good things that happened." Out of the mouths of babes, Marcus thought, comes uncomfortable truth. Maybe it hadn't been all luck. Maybe he had earned some of this through the choices he'd made, the risks he'd taken, the refusal to stay down when life knocked him flat. As winter settled in, Marcus's consulting division hit a major milestone, their 50th client. It was a small nonprofit that ran after-school programs in low-income neighborhoods, concerned about child safety and liability issues. Marcus did the assessment personally, walking through facilities that reminded him of the programs Lily had attended when he was working 2 jobs. He provided them with a comprehensive security plan at a significantly reduced rate, knowing they couldn't afford standard pricing. When Evelyn saw the contract, she called him into her office. "You're charging them about a third of our usual fee," she said, though her tone wasn't accusatory. "They can't afford more. But they need the help. They're serving kids whose parents are in the same situation I was in a year ago. If one of those kids gets hurt because we priced ourselves out of their budget, I couldn't live with that." Evelyn smiled, and Marcus saw approval in her expression. "That's exactly the right call. And it's why I knew you were the right person to build this division. We're not just in business to make money, we're in business to make a difference." Christmas was magical in a way it hadn't been since before Sarah died. Marcus and Lily decorated their apartment with lights and a real tree that filled their living room with pine scent. They baked cookies together, went ice skating at the outdoor rink downtown, drove through neighborhoods looking at elaborate light displays. On Christmas morning, Lily tore into presents with unbridled joy, books and art supplies and clothes and, yes, a stuffed dog that Marcus promised was a placeholder for the real thing they'd get in the spring once they were ready. "This is the best Christmas ever," Lily declared, surrounded by wrapping paper and ribbon. "Yeah?" Marcus asked, watching her from the couch with coffee in hand. "Yeah. Because you're actually here. Not just here in the room, but really here. Happy and not worried and not about to leave for work." She climbed onto the couch beside him. "I like this version of you better." Marcus pulled her close, breathing in her shampoo, feeling her solid warmth against his side. "I like this version of me better, too." As the new year arrived, Marcus found himself reflecting on the distance traveled in 12 months. From 2 jobs and desperation to 1 career and stability, from survival mode to actually living, from constant fear to cautious hope to genuine happiness. The ripples from that February night continued to spread. Nina graduated from nursing school in May and started her position in the trauma unit, where she became known for her compassionate care and her willingness to advocate fiercely for her patients. The scholarship in Sarah's name sent 3 more students to college. The nonprofit Marcus had helped secure went on to expand to 2 additional locations, serving hundreds more children. And Marcus kept building his career, building his team, building a life for himself and Lily that honored Sarah's memory while moving forward into their own future. He was promoted to director of the security division in June, with full autonomy over operations and strategy. He hired 5 more consultants, prioritizing people with unconventional backgrounds who brought unique perspectives to the work. On a warm evening in July, Marcus and Lily sat on their small porch, the one he'd stood on that first night in their new apartment, looking up at stars. "Daddy," Lily said, now 8 years old and somehow both more mature and more joyfully childlike than she'd been a year ago. "Do you ever think about that night at the diner?" "Sometimes. Why?" "I'm glad you helped her, even though you got hurt and it was scary, because if you hadn't, we wouldn't be here now, in this apartment with the purple room and the yard and everything good." Marcus considered correcting her, explaining that the connection wasn't quite that simple. But maybe it was. Maybe one choice really had changed everything, setting in motion a chain of events that had transformed their lives completely. "I'm glad too," he said simply. "Even with the bruises and the fear, I'm glad I stood up." "Me too, because you taught me something important." "What's that, baby?" "That being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It just means you do the right thing anyway. And that sometimes doing the right thing, even when it's hard, leads to good things you never expected." Marcus looked at his daughter, at this incredible person who'd somehow absorbed life lessons from hardship without being broken by them, who'd watched her father struggle and triumph and learned from both, and felt a gratitude so profound it left him breathless. "You're pretty wise for 8 years old." "I know," Lily said with perfect confidence. "I get it from you." They sat together as the stars emerged, father and daughter, survivors and thrivers, testament to the truth that courage ripples outward in ways impossible to predict or measure. That one moment of choice, one decision to stand when sitting would be easier, could change not just one life, but many. Marcus thought about Travis in prison, hopefully learning better choices. About Nina saving lives in the trauma unit. About the students attending college because of Sarah's scholarship. About the families sleeping safer because of security assessments his team had conducted. About Lily growing up confident and kind, secure in her father's love and presence. All of it connected back to that February night in a roadside diner, to a small voice asking, "Please help her." To a tired father choosing courage over comfort. The world kept turning. The stars kept shining. And Marcus Hale, once invisible and exhausted and barely holding on, sat on his porch with his daughter and felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that when his moment came, when everything hung in the balance, he'd made the choice that mattered. He'd stood up. And in standing, he'd built a life worth living, not just for himself, but for everyone his courage had touched. That was his legacy, more valuable than any promotion or salary or recognition. He'd been brave when it counted, and that, in the end, made all the difference.